Hi, here we are at the last month of our Saturday sampler, month 12. Unfortunately, today's block name is nameless, which is kind of crazy, but who would have thought when we started this a year ago that we would only get halfway through the blocks in person and then we would do the entire last half virtually. But here we are today to finish up. So thank you all for keeping up with us during the last 6 months and for cooperating with how we had to get this done. I hope you've still enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the videos that I've done. So I'd like to show you today's block. So here's today's block number 12, called Nameless. There are just a couple of little things that I want to show you about making this block. You really know how to do all of it, but there's just a couple little tricks. But let's start first with the cutting. Of course, you have the 2 sheets. My sheet that I always make up with you with the palette on it, the swatches, and then Michelle's directions. This time, for the first time in several months, my cutting is exactly like her cutting, but I do want to show you a couple of things. Be sure to just follow along as we start with light, medium, and medium dark on your own colorway. Everything is cut as squares, and the light, the medium starts as squares, but then we cut them in half once diagonally to make triangles. The medium dark, 2 squares. The dark, now notice this is certainly not the darkest in my packet, but it is what we're calling the dark. You have 2 different size squares there. The background also has 2 different size squares. The larger one you're cutting 2. The smaller one you cut 6, 4 of which you leave whole, and 2 of which you cut into triangles. So I want to show you just a little bit of something, but it's going to require me to do some sewing first, which you don't have to watch. I'll be right back. So here's the little bit of sewing that I've done. This is step 1 through 4 of Michelle's directions. So I've taken the center square, which was the small piece of dark, and the 4 triangles of background. I sewed 2 of them on opposite ends, pressed the seam outward, sewed the other 2 in this direction. This is actually step 1 through 3. On step 4, she trims it. Now she uses a special ruler that's all marked for a finished size block. I didn't see a need for us having that ruler really, and that's why we do not have that squared, or the super squared that she talks about. But what we need to do now is to trim this down to 4 3/4 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim each edge one at a time. And the way I'm going to do that is I know that 4 3/4 divided by 2 is 2 3/8. So I'm going to find the mark that's 2 3/8 on my ruler, put that right at the point at the top, right where the edge of the center square is, and right at the point at the bottom. And then I'm going to trim off the right hand edge. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Again, 2 3/8 right at the point, 1 2 3/8 right at the point, and trim. So as I go around, I'm going to do the same thing on every side. 2 3/8, 2 3/8 down there, trim this off. And this is automatically giving me my 1/4 inch on outside of each point. Takes a little bit of finagling to get it in place. 1 2 3/8. And then I have my piece that's 4 3/4. So I didn't exactly mention that the way I got here, let me just repeat, was I followed her directions, step 1, 2, and 3, and that got the points, the corners on each of these pieces. Then I skipped 4, 5, and 6 and instead went to the directions on my sheet where it says to trim the unit to 4 3/4 inches, and to do that you're measuring 2 3/8 from the center on every side. So that's what I just did. Next, I'm going to follow steps 7 and 8 to make the next round of squares, and I'm going to add a triangle of this to each side, sew that, press it out, and then sew these two on. I'm going to trim again down to 6 1/2, but let me go sew and I'll show it to you again. So here I am again, ready to go. I did what is in the directions of steps 7 and 8, added the 4 corner pieces onto the unit I had made previously. Now this is oversized and I need to trim this down to 6 1/2 inches. So again, the way I find it easiest to do and get things lined up nicely with this, because we're not using her ruler, is I want to make the 6 1/2. Half of that is 3 1/4. So I put a 3 1/4 inch line at that point and at this point down here. The 3 1/4 is actually a little easier to see than the one that was 3/8 before, because on my ruler the yellow lines are the quarters. So I'm going to trim this off here, turn it, 3 1/4, 3 1/4. If all is well, you should have these, the 45-degree mark here just happens to be parallel with the seam that you've made on the diagonal. So I'm just going to continue that way, 3 1/4 each time. I always said that I was very good at making one cut and closing my blade. And then the last couple of times I've done videos, I realized that I was lying, that I didn't really do that, and I'm trying to do it now. So 3 1/4 at each point. I close my blade and I'm going to open it. And there we are, 6 1/2 inches. So the last thing we have to do is to make quarter square triangles. Now I'm not going to go through that with you again. You know how to do that. I have to tell you that I made the mistake, and then the two quarter square triangles get sewn together. I made the mistake on these that when they are in this way, when they're just single quarter squares, they need to be trimmed down to 3 1/2 inches. I forgot to do that. I put these together, and guess what? They're too long. So these are not really usable. I'm using them for illustration purposes only. So you'll be taking your center square, putting, the way this lays out is then there's one of these on each edge. Be sure that you are putting the triangles that are made of background to the outside. And you have 4 squares then that finish up by going in the corner. So you'll be making rows like you usually do, and then sewing the rows together like a 9 patch. There you will have it. Last block, number 12. Thank you so much for sticking with this all the way through. Everybody should have your finishing kit if you ordered one, or if not, it's here waiting for you. And yes, we'll be doing Saturday Sampler again, probably in January. I have a bit of work to do yet to do that. Thank you. Bye-bye.